We can point out a theme of disparaging portrayals in an author's work. We can point to such patterns as a reason for dismissing their work. But calling a female author sexist for making disparaging remarks against women is arguably useless because such terms are so subjective. Rather than focus on categorization of someone's hatred as racism, sexism, ableism, etc. See, you're saying it's hatred though, but just because there are things happening in a book that are hateful does not mean that the author themselves are full of hatred.
It is more useful to say, for instance, the repeated portrayal of characters within these attributes seems to indicate the author's personal biases, diminishes the quality of their work for these reasons, and consequently, conclusion. Okay, maybe I'll give you a few points on that one. So, in other words, if you see a running theme in an author's work, you could say, yeah, maybe this author seems a little hung up on particular themes, or the author appears to be hung up on particular ideas, what have you. But, that's still just interpretation. Generally speaking, I think organic representation is a wonderful, useful thing. Yes, but also boring, though. There's this thing in fiction where it's like people think that fiction has to be realistic. It has to be, the characters in fiction have to be realistic portrayals of actual human beings in real life. And it's like, no, they're characters. Not each and every single character has to be well-rounded or have, needs to be three-dimensional in that aspect. Maybe there are some characters that are literally just the stereotype for a particular reason in the plot. Maybe there are one-dimensional characters involved in the story. You probably don't want to have your main characters be one-dimensional, but say, for instance, there could be one-dimensional or two-dimensional support characters that are there just to serve for that one-dimensional, two-dimensional reasoning. Like they have a role to play, and that's it. They got that one, they're a one-trick pony, and that's it. And that's their purpose in the story. They don't need to have a backstory. They don't need to have depth. They don't need to have dealt with trauma or anything like that in their life. No, they're literally just the token character or the stereotype character for a particular reason. When they make representation a priority over the story itself, the result is often one-note characters who are defined solely by whatever it is they're meant to represent. Exactly. They become caricatures, not characters. But a caricature is a character, though. If a character is a caricature, like in other words, they're just representing a stereotype or a cliche or a trope or something like that, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just understanding they are a caricature. And you could mention that too. Like if you're critiquing a piece of work, you're like, oh, this character is not deep at all. It's just a surface level character. Creating such caricatures results in poor representation. Not necessarily though, because it comes back to context. Does it make sense in the story? Maybe the story is a comedy and you need some stereotypes in there for comedic purposes. For the people being represented, diminishes the quality of the story, and personally, it diminishes the author's reputation. Now you're taking it too far. You're getting into the personal realm. You're starting to sound like one of those Looney Tunes, man. You're turning it into trying to make this a personal thing, like you're getting personal with it. You almost sound like you're a hop, skip, and a jump away from canceling, trying to do some cancel culture stuff. An author's reputation as a storyteller, in my mind, because they resort to signaling virtues rather than telling a good story. You'd have to clarify on that one. If the selling point of your story is the demographics of the characters, it indicates the story itself is lackluster. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. So in other words, if you're saying the author is just checking boxes. And there's significant chance the story is really sermon, political, religious, social, or whatever you, wrapped in fiction's clothing. It's a parable. In other words, for some sort of message. And there's nothing wrong with a message. I weave messages into my stories, and I've been open about that, but I'm not, one thing I'm not open about is my intention of why I weave those messages into the story. That's for you guys to decide why I include certain messages in my stories. Parables are fine if that's what you signed up for, but most people don't care to be preached at. Certainly, they're more opposed to being preached at. You see, you can only speak for yourself, though. Again, I like controversial material. I like provocative material. That stuff is entertaining to me. I don't read just for escapism. I read to be, I read for intellectual, I read not only for entertainment, but also intellectual stimulation. That's why I read more than just pulp fiction. If I wanted to read just to be entertained and for escapism, just read pulp fiction. Just read, read cheesy, campy shit, or just read, like I say, pulp fiction, like horror genre or something like that. You know what I mean? But if you want to be intellectually stimulated, if you want to be psychologically challenged in any shape, fashion, or form, to think and reflect upon the material well after you're done reading it, well, you gotta be willing to to read stuff that other people might raise an eyebrow at. You know what I mean? I'm a strong proponent. There's no book that should not be read. You can read, you're free to read whatever the hell you want. Any book. There's no book that should be banned. There's no book that's off limits as far as that goes. Certainly, they're opposed to being preached at for a message they disagree with. But even if they agree with the message, it's unlikely they're often willing to sacrifice the quality of the story for the sake of the message itself. Yeah, I mean, that's another thing. I mean, to play devil's advocate as far as that goes, yeah, I mean, you can't just push a message. Like, the story actually has to be compelling as well, or else you're going to lose people. You're going to have, it's going to be like Veggie Tales or something. There's a reason the little engine that could, and the tortoise and the hare have not been retold to general audiences the world over outside of cartoons children will watch until a certain age and then never again of their own volition. Well, thanks for that long comment on that one. Okay. And glad to see you stop by the channel. I am interested to hear more from you.